911.
Cardiac arrest.
25-0.
We have a working fire.
Hold traffic, shots fired.
Tell me a little bit about one of the, if you don't mind sharing, one of the challenging days that you had talked about before when you were out on a 911 call and had learned about your father. And would you mind sharing that again, a little bit about, your challenge with your mom pretty much being, your only parent growing up, and then the day that you lost your father?
So as a young man, I'm talking about 10 and 12 years old, we would have guests at our house. These guests were always prefaced by titles such as Colonel, Major, General, and I never thought much of it. But later in life, I learned, actually, I guess 10, I figured out my father we had a beautiful globe at our house. And he asked me to find Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him I was a little lost. He said, Southeast Asia. Okay, I'm on it. And I found it. And he turned to me and says, well, that's where I'm going to be going for the next 6 months. Okay. I said, what are you going to be there? What are you going to do there? He says, I'm going to be an agricultural advisor. I went, I said, Dad, we're not farmers. So what are you going to grow? He says, I'm going to grow young men to be able to take care of their country. And I'm going like, that's interesting. And I can remember the people that would come into our house. This one guy was always so very kind to me. And he said, Mike, you can call me by my first name. And I said, Colonel, when my father tells me I can call you by your first name is the day that I will call you by your first name.
Mm-hmm.
And my father had a challenge in his life that after World War II, I had happily married to my mom. So he was happily married to my mom. That's an edit point. And he didn't assimilate well with civilian life.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and father had a daughter, Susan, who was 8 years old, and 2 months before I was born, she contracted German measles and died of pneumonia. This is circa 1955.
Mm-hmm.
So that set him off. He was good at many things, and getting away from that area that he lived in, I want to say regressed, but he actually transformed to being a contractor in today's terms, a mercenary in terms of that year. Going ahead and seeing him and it was odd. He would be home for 3 weeks. He'd be gone for 2 weeks. He'd be home for 4 months. He'd be gone for a week. He'd be gone for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
There was no rhyme or reason. I had moved to Florida, and I was.
You think some of that might have been from, when he lost your sister?
Yeah, my mother told me that just set him off, and he needed to be able to do what he was good at and what came natural to him, and that work wasn't in the area that we lived in.
Mm-hmm.
So I had moved to Florida with the blessings of the family. Actually, the first thing they said was, "We'll see you back for Thanksgiving."
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, I'll come back for Thanksgiving, no doubt about it, but I'm going to live in Florida, but I was being dispatched on a call. It was going to take us about 12 minutes to get there. And, about 4 minutes into the call, dispatcher, sent a second unit to the call, which I thought was kind of crazy. Because it was just a general medical call, and then told us to stop responding and brought us back to the station. And I looked at my partner and I said, we haven't killed anybody in the last couple of days. Do you remember us doing anything wrong?
You must have been eyeballing each other. What did you do?
I mean, it's like we haven't wrecked an ambulance. We haven't, done anything. It's like, why would they do that to us, And because, wait a minute, the other crew that was going there wasn't as good as we are. So that,
why are they sending the B team?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, oh, well, we got into the station. At that time, the dispatcher was right at that station. And, because we're a third party ambulance service. And the dispatcher says, hey, let's go into the conference room. I need to talk to you. Well, it's obviously, me that did something wrong, not my partner. He was relieved. And then he told me that my mother had called, the Pittsburgh Police Department called and said that my father had passed and they want me to come home right away. And so I'm going he says, so we're calling in somebody to take your shift and you can get squared away. And I'm going I don't have anybody to be with. That
must have been a long flight.
And it was a long flight. But I worked the rest of my shift. I said, I have nobody to hang out with. I'm just going to go home to, my stereo and me.
Mm-hmm.
And, the guy says maybe a good, stiff drink would work for you. And I'm going, I don't need to drink. Let me just kind of reflect in the moment. I called my mother and, the company I was working for actually, got the flight squared away for me. So the next day I could take the next flight out, in the morning. But what was odd was when the police called me and, because it was like phone tag, I called them and then they called me and said, he's got a few questions for me. And I said, I'll answer anything, And he says, well, we want to know why your father had 3 different passports.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what a passport was really, and because I never traveled internationally, and at that time you didn't need a passport to go to Canada, and so I said, what do you mean 3 passports? I says, well, he travels a lot, so maybe, if you lose one, you have the second one. He goes, no. One is a German passport. One is an Israeli passport. One is an American passport. I'm going, well, he works with all of those countries, I guess. Maybe that's something they give you. And I said, I have no idea why. I mean, I really didn't. And talked to him, answered questions, and then he called me back in about 2 hours and said, so we're on the scene, and it was a hotel room. And I had asked about injuries, and he says, your father has significant facial injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And he called back and he says, while we were there, a person identified themselves as a federal official and asked the police to get out of the room. And, 10 minutes later, they let them have the scene, but that evidence was gone. So it gave me a little pause of what my father was doing. When when I was graduating from high school, we received a call from Israel. And I wish for the life of me I could remember the person's name right now, but it was a colonel from the Israeli army that apologized that my father was not going to be at my high school graduation because his country needed him. And he says, to help you, he says, I have a son your age, and I need him to be in our family. And I know you miss your dad, but your father here is going to keep us and him safe in the future. So accept that as an apology. Your father wants to be there. So I want to consistently believe that my family has been saving lives for a living for years. And I accept his life. Beautiful.
Yeah, it certainly is the hidden side that I think that I didn't really understand till getting into the fire service, even though I'm a military brat with 19 veterans in our extended family. But many of them were, years ago. My grandfather had 9 brothers that served concurrently in World War II. He would have been the 10th, but he, as I recall, was working for a munitions factory, and they petitioned him to stay on to continue in the production because they didn't want to have to replace him. So he ended up conceding and taking a deferment. But so much of that is generations ago. The hidden cost of, the various aspects of public service on family life and contributing to absent parents. It's something that I know a lot of people still struggle with that I talk with in the profession to this day.
Well, it was, again, when you think of pressure, my father, and I don't know how to say this because I feel bad about it and I feel okay about it, but I'm the first male adult with the name Staley in my lineage that has never served in the military since the Civil War.
Wow.
And I feel, again, if called, I would have gone. I just didn't want to volunteer. Would I have done well in the military? My friends say yes. Would the military have been good for me? Many say yes. But I think we're given a mission.
Once again, this is your host, Christopher, of the Ukrainian Fire Chaplain Show. If you have not already, go ahead and look at our website, theufcshow.com. It's got information about us and ways that you can follow, subscribe, or support us. We're on various podcast platforms. We're on Facebook and YouTube. And if you're able to, consider supporting us on Patreon. Also want to give a shout out to Daniel Atchison, the music artist Atch, for permission to use his song Forever in our productions. Until next time.